Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Jeremiah, the second chapter, as we continue on in Jeremiah's ministry, as he is just sort of getting into it. So, pretty much as we go into this chapter, the Most High comes to Jeremiah, right, and instructs him to go and cry unto the inhabitants of Jerusalem and call them out on their transgressions, highlighting the case that the Most High has against them for their unfaithfulness and their eagerness to trust in idols and other nations, the Assyrians, the Egyptians, for support, and pretty much listen to anybody else but the Most High. So this is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 2, verse 1. Moreover, the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto me, saying, Go and cry in the ears of Jerusalem, saying, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, I remember thee, the kindness of thy youth. So the Lord sent Jeremiah to go, into the midst of those in Jerusalem, and to go and cry out, right? Prophesy or speak these words in the ear so people can hear it. Saying, I remember thee, the kindness of thy youth, the kindness of your youth, meaning like the goodness, the faithfulness of Israel when they were, when we were just becoming a nation. The love of thine espousals. So how, in the beginning, Israel loved to be espoused unto the Lord. When thou wentest after me in the wilderness, following, because remember, when we were delivered out of Egypt, we spent decades in the wilderness before coming into the promised land. And we had to depend upon the Lord, right, and trust upon the Lord. In a land that was not sown, right, dealing with the that region that we were journeying through. Verse 3, Israel was holiness unto the Lord, and the first fruits of his increase. So at the time, the Lord looked at Israel as, separate, as holy, as special, right? As it mentions the first fruits of his increase, which was like the special portion. All that devour him shall offend, right? So if anybody was to harm Israel, they would anger the Lord and incur his wrath. Evil shall come upon them, saith the Lord. So the Lord would recompense evil upon whatever nation would harm Israel. Hear ye the word of the Lord Yahweh, O house of Jacob, and all the families of the house of Israel. So listen, because this is what the Lord has to say. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, what iniquity have your fathers found in me, that they are gone far from me? So, with how estranged Israel became from the Lord, he was saying, like, what have I done wrong, right? What evil have I done in terms of our contract? Where did I breach it that caused you to separate far from me and to start worshiping idols and to disregard the ways that are pleasing unto me, and have walked after vanity and are become vain? And walking after vanity primarily because they started to worship the idols, right, or the quote unquote gods of the heathen nations that were round about, and it made them vain, right? Verse 6, neither said they, where is the Lord Yahweh that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, that led us through through the wilderness, through a land of deserts and of pits, right? So, our people they didn't stop to consider, like, where's the actual God that delivered us from Israel, right? Why don't we go and serve him? They didn't even call the Lord to remembrance, right? They just continued on waxing worse and worse, like an adulterous woman, right? Not just cheating on her man once, but with multiple lovers. That's why the scripture sometimes liken Israel unto a harlot, not just an adulterous woman, but a harlot. Through a land of drought and of the shadow of death. So the Lord guided us through that journey in the wilderness, provided for us that we that we didn't want, that we didn't lack, that we didn't die, through a land that no man passed through and where no man dwelt. And what that means is that, it wasn't a land that was frequented, right? Yeah, certain people would journey, but there were known paths, right? So if we look up here, the Israel in the wilderness, let's see if we can get, all right, I'll see if I can zoom in. Okay, this is not bad. So this is following, possible route of the Exodus. And from Egypt, right, coming into this Sinai Peninsula, or the wilderness of Sinai, and then going all the way around through all these different areas, right, possible route as it says, and then eventually the Lord brought us, right after 40 years, to the east of Jordan, to cross over into the land of Canaan, right? Now, as you can see, this right here is a route, right, way to the land of the Philistines. And then there's also another route here, right? But there are some main routes that are established depending on where you want to go. If you wanted to go up here into the land of Canaan, you wouldn't necessarily come through this path right here, right? Or this path right here. You would go through this coastal area and then through the Via Maris, or the Way of the Sea. And then you could either keep on, traversing through there, or I forget exactly where, if the King's Highway was like on this side or on this side, but there were established routes. So most people would follow those routes when traveling from Egypt up north, or so on and so forth. But the route where the Lord took us through, was a different or special one. And that's why, as we're reading on here, it mentions that a land that no man passed through and where no man dwelt. And I brought you into a plentiful country, which is the land of Canaan, to eat the fruit thereof and the goodness thereof. But when ye entered, ye defiled my land and made mine heritage an abomination. So once the Lord brought Israel and we conquered the Canaanites and we took the land for ourselves, it didn't take long before Israel started to worship and follow the customs of the heathens that were round about them. And when you read in the book of Judges, right, you'll see numerous accounts of those actions leading to us being captive, right, being in captivity, and then the Lord delivering us by raising up a judge, and then Israel running right back into that habit of wickedness. So as it says, once the Lord gave us the land, Israel defiled it, right? They started to, commit wickedness in the land, from murder to idolatry, which is one of the heavy ones, and just all manner of things that polluted the land, sacrifices onto idols. And as it says, it made the heritage of the Lord an abomination. So rather than a place where he desired to look upon, it became an abominable place. Verse 8, the priests said not, where is the Lord? So they didn't seek the Lord. And they that handle the law knew me not, as to where it was their responsibility to be to seek the Lord, right? But instead, the priests turned to pagan priests, rather than doers and keepers of the law and teachers of it. The pastors also transgress against me. The pastors goes into like the shepherds or the overseers who were supposed to be leading the flock in the right path, or they transgressed against the Lord through corruption. And the prophets prophesied by Baal, right, as opposed to prophesying through the spirit and power of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. You had a lot of them that were prophets of these deities, and they would influence Israel to, sacrifice more unto this God. Or, Baal says, if you do this, if you do that, then you'll be good, or you'll do this, or you'll gain this. as it says here, and walked after things that do not profit. See, and those were the things that made them vain, the ways of these idols. Today we see examples of prophets prophesying after, these other deities, where they'll tell you, in these different religions that their prophets spoke about this, and you got to follow it this way, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. But it's not, and majority of them are like Israelites, but they're not speaking according to the ways of the Lord. They're not listening to the true prophets. Wherefore I will yet plead with you. And the word plead doesn't mean to beg here. Here it means to strive with, or to bring a case against, or contend with. So the Lord is like, I have a problem with you. I'm going to contend with you, saith the Lord. And with your children's children will I plead. And remember, this is Jeremiah speaking to the people the message the Lord has told him. That's why he says, saith the Lord. This is what the Lord told me to tell you, that I'm going to contend with you and your children's children. For pass over the isles of Chittim, or Kittim, which is Cyprus, and see, and send unto Kedar, and consider. And these are regions, right? I think Kedar was like southeast-ish of Jerusalem, and Kittim was more like northwest. So the Lord is like, go to these areas around, and observe, and see, and consider diligently, and see if there be such a thing, and see if this situation that we have here, that of you, with everything that your God has done for you, and then in your behavior, see if even in these in these other nations you would see such a thing. Verse 11, hath a nation changed their gods, which are yet no gods? So even these nations whose gods that they follow, which are really idols, they're not really any gods, even they don't trade in their gods for another. But my people have changed their glory, and the glory here being the Lord, for that which doth not profit, for an idol. So rather than serving the Lord, they traded in their God for idols. Be astonished, O ye heavens, at this, and be horribly afraid. Be ye very desolate, saith the Lord. Right? So, Salakia, so the Lord is saying here, bear witness, right? Be shocked, O ye heavens, and see, see this this level of wickedness, that my people are doing. And as it says, be ye very desolate, saith the Lord, because that's what he was about to bring upon Israel. Verse 13, for my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewn them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. Now, a cistern is like a well, but not quite, right? A well is when you dig into the earth, and then you strike into a body of water right underneath, that then fills up the well and supplies you with water. That's the living waters, the fountain of living waters that the Lord describes himself as in verse 13. The cistern was, you would cut, or break into the ground, but you wouldn't dig to hit a water mine, so to speak. You would just dig a big enough space, or a pit, and then they would plaster the inside with a waterproof element. And then when it rained, or mainly through rain, they would gather water in the cistern, which is like an artificial well, to hold water, right? So here, if you look up, I looked up here, how were cisterns made in the ancient world? It says ancient cisterns were built by carving them into rock, or by constructing waterproof tanks from clay, stone, or brick, often incorporating impermeable hydraulic plaster or clay linings to prevent leaks. And so if we look up here, let me see here. Yeah, this isn't too bad. I'm trying to see if I can find a better diagram. But if not, we can probably use this one here. So you dig, right? You dig, and then you basically dig a hole, a big hole in the ground, and then you plaster the inside, and then when it rains, the water fills it up. But the Lord says, because this isn't, you can't really depend much on this as compared to a well, right? So if we look up a cistern versus well, here's a good example. All right, so a well, you'll have that constant flow of water because of that supply. This runs out. If it runs out, you're cooked. So the Lord is saying here, he is like that fountain. He is like that well, right? But Israel forsook him and instead decided to hew themselves out cisterns, right? Broken cisterns that could hold no water. So imagine this, where there's a crack in the lining or whatnot. And so any water that comes in, it's not being held in here. That's unreliable. So rather than depending upon the Lord in their actions, they went and sought after these other gods, which are likened unto broken cisterns, and they cannot be relied upon. Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? Right? So it's rhetorical, right? But it's asking, are you a servant, right? Or are you a slave? Why have you become the prey? Okay, that's what it means by spoiled. The young lions roared upon him and yelled, and they made his land waste. His cities are burned without inhabitant. And this was, yes, Israel did go through this, like the Northern Kingdom, for example, at this point in time of Jeremiah's prophecy. The bulk of the Israelites of the Northern Kingdom had been carried away captive, the bulk of them. But also keeping in mind that there are often times when the prophets, because they've seen these things, when they speak about a future state of Israel, sometimes they speak of it in the present sense or even in the past tense as though it has already happened because they have already seen it, i.e. it's something that has been established to happen. And the young lions here are dealing with the nations, right, that the Lord raised up or would raise up against Israel. It says here, and they made his land waste, and his cities are burned without inhabitant. And this is something that would later happen to Jerusalem by the Babylonians. And a quick precept is here in the book of Jeremiah 50 and 17. Israel is a scattered sheep. The lions have driven him away. First, the king of Assyria hath devoured him, and last, this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, hath broken his bones. So here you can see how these nations, adversarial nations, are likened onto lions, right? Verse 16, and the children of Noph and Tahaphanes have broken the crown of thy head, and these are the Egyptians. And once again, this is something that would happen during the time of Jeremiah, but a bit later into his ministry, when Pharaoh Necho came up and tried to go through the land, and Josiah came out to fight against him, and he ended up slaying Josiah, and then ended up removing Jehoahaz, Josiah's son, who was then set up as king, and then setting up, I believe it was Jehoiakim in his stead. So as it says, they have broken the crown of thine head, which would make us subject unto them. Hast thou not procured this unto thyself? So is this not something you brought upon yourself? In that thou hast forsaken the Lord thy God, when he led thee by the way. So by you turning your back on the Lord, you basically brought this upon yourself. Is it anybody else's fault but you? And now what hast thou to do in the way of Egypt? To drink the waters of Sihor? Or what hast thou to do in the way of Assyria? To drink the waters of the river? The river here is referring to the Euphrates. And what this is saying is, what business do you have trying to form alliances or dependencies with these nations, i.e. Egypt or Syria? And when it says to drink the waters of, it's like to rely upon him, right? As how when we read in the 13th verse, the Lord likened himself onto the fountain, right, of water, and then the Israel's them basically going after their own might as to them hewing broken cisterns, right? So that water, that drinking of the waters of Sihor, or of the river, i.e. the Euphrates, would be depending upon these nations here, or going to them for support, which Israel was doing. Verse 19, thine own wickedness shall correct thee, right? So the wickedness that you're doing has a consequence. It has a recompense, and that will be your correction. That will be your punishment. And thy backslidings shall reprove thee. Know therefore and see that it is an evil thing and bitter that thou hast forsaken the Lord Yahweh thy God, and that my fear is not is not in thee, saith the Lord of hosts. Yeah. So keep that in mind, that you turning your back on the Lord, you forsaking the Lord, you deciding to go after your own ways, is not a light thing. That's a very evil and bitter thing, and it's going to come with consequences. For of old time I have broken thy yoke and burst thy bands. And the yoke meaning the your physical yoke would be like if you actually had the collars on your neck, shackles on your hands and your feet, but it represents captivity or slavery. And when you go back into the time of old in our history, we were slaves in Egypt, which the Lord broke that yoke from off of us. And thou saidest, I will not transgress. See, so when the Lord delivered us, we said, oh yeah, we're going to follow you. We're going to be your people. You'll be our God, and we won't transgress your ways. Whereupon every high hill and under every green tree thou wanderest, playing the harlot. So you said this, and yet, upon every hill, right, every grove, you're out here playing the harlot. Meaning you're out here sacrificing onto idols and building shrines. And the Lord likens that onto harlotry. Yet I had planted thee a noble vine, wholly a right seed, right? So figuratively, the Lord is saying, when I raised you up, when I built you, when I put you together, and I planted you as a nation, I took precaution. I used a good seed, right, and planted you as a noble vine. How then art thou turned into the degenerate plant of a strange vine unto me? So how is it that when you grew after me watering you and everything, you've become this wild, strange vine that's not producing good fruit? For though thou wash thee with nitre and take thee much soap, which this is a cleansing agent, yet thine iniquity is marked before me, saith the Lord. So no matter what you try to do to cover or hide or make excuses, your wickedness is before me. All right, I can see it. It's like a stain, that even bleach cannot remove. How canst thou say I am not polluted? I have not gone after Baalim. See thy way in the valley. So how are you gonna turn around and tell me that you're not you're not doing wickedness? You're still my people. Go and look in the valleys, where you commit those sacrifices and child sacrifices and worship those idols over there. Literally, that's bearing witness to the things that you're doing that I'm complaining about. Know what thou hast done. Thou art a swift dromedary traversing her ways. So the Lord is like, you're like a dromedary is a female camel. So you're like a female camel in heat, looking for a mate. Okay, that's why it mentions a swift dromedary traversing, meaning to go about her ways. I looked up here, behavior of a female camel in heat. It says here, during the estrus or heat cycle, female camels exhibit signs such as restlessness, frequent urination, and tail flapping. I'm not going to read the rest, but it's from that restlessness that they continuously move about, and you can see it. So pulling this up in the NLT, it says here, you say that is not true. I haven't worshipped the images of Baal. But how can you say that? Go and look in the valley, in any valley in the land. Face the awful sins you have done. You are like a restless female camel desperately searching for a mate. And the Lord is likening how quickly and desperately Israel seeks after these idols to this camel in heat looking for a mate. A wild ass used to the wilderness. So you're like a wild donkey that's accustomed to the wild or the wilderness, that snuffeth up the wind at her pleasure. And when you go into this word snuffeth, it's basically to like sniff to sniff the wind and see and search for a mate. It says here to gasp, pant long after, breathe heavily. Okay, to pant after and be eager for, to gasp or pant with desire. So when you go back here and it says here, what that snuffeth up the wind at her pleasure, it says here lust, desire, right? So like a donkey that's in heat seeking a mate, as it says in her occasion. Let me actually just look up the verse again. In her occasion, who can turn her away? So when it's in heat, you can't stop it. All they that seek her will not weary themselves. So for those, if a mate was looking for a partner, they wouldn't have to look far to find this wild ass in heat. In her month they shall find her, because she's going to be looking. And the Lord used that to describe Israel, to say that you're like a wild ass in heat, looking for a mate. And anybody that, like, for example, if you likened the idols onto lovers, they wouldn't have to look far to find you. You're basically like a whore that's chasing down customers. Verse 25, withhold thy foot from being unshod. And withhold meaning to hold back your foot from being unshod. Now, in the ancient world, unshod meaning like if you have shoes on, when you take them off, they're unshod, right? So you're not like barefoot. In the ancient world, most of the footwear was like sandals, right, or like slippers. And so if you weren't careful, they could rip or tear, and then you would be barefoot. So here the Lord is saying, right, withhold your foot from being unshod, and thy throat from thirst. But thou saidest, there is no hope. No, for I have loved strangers, and after them will I go. So Israel kept chasing after, metaphorically that is, right, but in terms of this analogy, but they kept chasing after these idols as a woman chasing after lovers, so much so that they would end up like barefoot and thirsty from all that running. And that's why the Lord is saying here, basically, that's enough. Stop chasing these idols. Okay, stop going in the ways, every which way, to follow your desire and forsake me. But they replied, no, right? For I have loved strangers, which is loving to serve these, to worship these idols, and after them will I go. And what that looks like today is when you tell people the truth and they openly refuse and say, nope, that's not my Jesus. I'm gonna keep serving Allah. I'm gonna keep on doing this, that, and the third. I'll serve God the way I want to serve God. So there you have it. That's your modern day example of Jeremiah 2:25. Verse 26, as the thief is ashamed when he is found, so is the house of Israel ashamed. They say their kings, their princes, and their priests, and their prophets. Okay, it's like not they say, but they. And the Lord is saying, like, if a thief is mid stealing, and then the whole city, like, here's an example. There's a video of a guy that goes into a store to try and rob it, and he gets in there, and then the owners of the store, like, they were strategic, so they basically, like, I think they ran outside and locked him in, so he was stuck inside of the actual store until the cops came. And then at first he's mad aggressive and like all this, but then eventually he starts crying and begging and please, please, please let me out. I gotta go. That's that shame, right? Of like doing something wrong and being caught. And the Lord is likening, he's saying, this is how you look right now, going after these idols and pursuing after this wicked ways, stacking on iniquity on top of iniquity, from the kings to the rulers to the princes to the priests to the prophets, because they were all corrupted, with the exception of the true prophets of course. Verse 27, saying to a stock, thou art my father, and to a stone thou hast brought me forth. And that is to worship, right? Because a stock, I believe it's like wood, right? Tree, wood, pieces of wood, and it is from that material they would make idols, right? So it's saying here, you're bowing down to a stock, basically acknowledging it as the one that brought you forth, or your creator, because that's what a father also does, right? By his seed, planting his seed in a woman, he is your progenitor. And to a stone, from which they could also carve out idols, thou hast brought me forth. So you're bowing down to inanimate objects and acknowledging them to be your creators, even though they are the work of your hands. For they have turned their back onto me and not their face. And when you have your face to the Lord, it's more so to pay respect, right? Or to worship. But when you turn your back to the Lord, it symbolizes or signifies you forsaking him, right? It says here, but in the time of their trouble, they will say, arise and save us. Go and read the book of Judges. You'll see this again and again and again. So here the Lord is saying that you're doing all this while I blessed you and I gave you the land. But when trouble comes, you're going to turn around and say, oh, Lord, please, we're your people and have mercy and deliver us. But where are thy gods that thou has made thee, right? So that stock, remember that? And that stone and those lovers that you said you were going to continuously go after, where are they? Why are you coming to me to deliver you? Am I not the one you forsook? Right? So the Lord says here, let them arise, right? If they can save thee in the time of thy trouble. So you worship them like they can. So let them save you. For according to the number of thy cities are thy gods, O Judah. So for every city there's a god, right? It's to it's like saying you multiply your idols like you do your cities. And yet trouble comes and you're going to come to me. Wherefore will ye plead with me, right? Ye all have transgressed against me, saith the Lord. So why are you, striving with me? Why are you trying to contend with me? You're the ones who have transgressed against me, all of you. In vain have I smitten your children. They receive no correction. So whether it's by plague or by famine or by correction of the prophets, they didn't listen. So it was all, the Lord is like those corrective measures, sending locusts to destroy your crops. It was all in vain because you didn't correct your ways. It's like when you discipline your child, but they don't learn. They keep on doing the same thing. It's in vain, because no matter how many times you discipline them, they're going to keep doing the same thing. Your own sword hath devoured your prophets like a destroying lion. So you've killed your own prophets, the ones that were sent to correct you, right? And to set you on the right path, to warn you. You did wickedness and then killed the prophets when I sent them. O generation, see ye the word of the Lord Yahweh. Have I been a wilderness unto Israel, a land of darkness? Wherefore say my people, we are lords, we will come no more unto thee. So the Lord is asking, right, via the mouth of Jeremiah, have I been like an undesirable place to you, right? A land of darkness or corruption or wickedness unto you? Because why is it then that you, being my people, are now reacting as though you have now become freed of me, right? And you can go and do whatever you want, and no longer do you have to come and serve me. Is my yoke that heavy to bear? Let me pull this up in another translation before we move on. NLT says, "O my people, listen to the words of the Lord. Have I been like a desert to Israel? Have I been to them a land of darkness? Why then do my people say, at last we are free from God. We don't need him anymore." Verse 32, "Can a maid forget her ornaments, or a bride her attire?" Is a bride on her wedding day gonna come out there and say, "Oh shoot, I forgot my dress"? That's one of the main things they focus on. You know, that's trying to get the perfect dress. You think they're gonna forget that? So they can't even forget these things, and yet my people have forgotten me days without number. So compare the importance of the Lord, right, a God to his people, and yet you can forget your God, right? When even a bride wouldn't even forget her clothes, her attire. And look at how much more important a God is to his people in comparison to a bride's attire to her. And yet she'll remember that, but you have forgotten the Lord, as it says, days without number. Today, here's an example. People can live their whole lives without thinking about Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. They can hear about it, they can hear us prophesy about it, and they can go about and live their regular lives without being stressed or stopping to consider and know. So they've forgotten the Lord. Why trimmest thou thy way to seek love? Therefore hast thou also taught the wicked ones thy ways. And I'll pull this up as well. It says in the NIV, how skilled you are at pursuing love. The love here is the love of idols. Even the worst of women can learn from your ways. So the analogy here is likening, once again, Israel to this harlot or prostitute. And that's why it says even the worst of women can learn from your ways, right? So they follow the ways of these heathens to serve these idols, and then they took it further. Okay, imagine that. Imagine picking up a pagan practice and getting so engulfed in it that now those original practitioners, so to speak, or the original worshippers of it, can now look to you to learn a thing or two. Isn't that crazy? Verse 34, also in thy skirts is found the blood of the souls of the poor innocents. I have not found it by secret search, but upon all these. So I didn't even have to look. I didn't even have to search. I didn't even have to do an investigation. It's openly upon you. As it says, the blood of the souls of the poor and innocents. And we've read in numerous, chapters by different prophets how not only did they extort and exploit the people and take advantage of the poor, but also they were setting people up, right, in the form of like actual, blood. Like for example, look at Ahab and was it Naboth? Yeah, I think that was his name. But the man whose inheritance Jezebel had him slain to give it to Ahab because he refused to sell it to him. Verse 35, yet thou sayest, because I am innocent, surely his anger shall turn from me. Behold, I will plead with thee, right? I will strive with you, because thou sayest I have not sinned. So you turn around with all this wickedness, with all this evidence on you, and say that you're innocent, that the Most High he's gonna overlook you. And he says, no, I'm gonna plead with you. I'm gonna strive with you. I'm gonna judge you, because on top of you committing iniquity, you're turning around and acting as though you're holy, you're clean, you're innocent. Why gaddest thou about so much to change thy way? Thou also shalt be ashamed of Egypt, as thou wast ashamed of Assyria. So just like you depended upon Assyria, and then they turned around and you saw what they did to the northern kingdom, and how they came against even the southern kingdom during the time of Hezekiah. Same way as you're trusting in Egypt now, that's going to happen to you. It's going to be to your shame. It will not be to your defense. Verse 37, yea, thou shalt go forth from him, and thine hands upon thine head, meaning you're going to be sent into captivity. For the Lord Yahweh hath rejected thy confidences. So the things in which you trusted and had confidence in, the Lord he's gonna basically bring it to naught, to where it's not gonna be to your avail. and thou shalt not prosper in them. Why? Because you're doing everything but what the Lord wants you to do. And that's to put your faith in him and trust in him. And that brings us to the end of the book of Jeremiah, the 2nd chapter. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Ruach HaKodesh. And until next time, Shalom.